I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and we were talking about, just the situation with my job, how I used to get three, four, five shifts a week to now, well, it went from two over the span of 3 months to just one now. So it's been 2 to 1 shifts each week for the last third of a year. And when we were talking to each other, I went into kind of just how when I started working there, I was getting, three, four shifts, but they were always about 8 hours long, and they give you these little crappy half shifts. And I was agreeing with him when I drew the conclusion that this is something that should be illegal. The practice of hiring people and then after a couple of weeks, a couple of months, deciding we're just not going to use you anywhere near as much as we used to, without the written consent of the employee, I think is something that should be banned. Now, a person could turn around and say this is something that could be exploited because an employee who's, like, let's say, disgruntled with their job, right? Could say, oh, well, see, my job used to give me this, but now they're only giving me this. And they could do that as like some way of bargaining against their job or just whatever. But my thing is, if you start working somewhere and that job at first gives you a set like a consistent streak of hours that are, like, let's say 24, 26, 28, within range of each other each week, I don't think they should be able to, after a period of a few months or hell, even a year, be like, well, I guess we'll just only use you twice a week now, once a week now. I think that's something that should be illegal. Um, and I think you could enforce it by, again, having some kind of written consent from the employee to agree to a reduction of hours. Because a lot of the stuff that employers do are tied to the really lousy labor laws that we've had in the U.S., right? Just the lack of progression in terms of checking out all the different scams that employers like to throw around to get out of paying people more money. I talked about how when the job had a wage increase, I went from getting consistently 20 something hours a week, damn near almost 30 a week, to now you're lucky if you can even get a double digit that's not starting with one. And this is really, right, dangerous in terms of people having the ability to take care of themselves. Um, I maintain that someone is going to come and go, why can't you just get a second job? You just get a second job. But if the one job that you currently have and the amount of hours that they gave you at a certain point were enough to satisfy your, I would say, pretty inexpensive lifestyle, I feel like the onus should be on the employer. Because, I've seen coworkers who will say, oh, I, want to not work here as often because I'm going back to school, or I start working at some other place too, and maybe if I like the other place more, I'll go and work there instead. But in the meantime, can I only get this day and that day? I've seen people do that where they agree to reductions of hours based off of some other, personal event. But if you're a person who, this place has 6 days, for example, of availability, like my job does, and they choose to just seemingly out of nowhere, without any provocation, start giving you barely any hours a week, right? A number that's less than 10. I think there should be something in place to stop that. I think there should be some labor law, some type of provision. Because, like I said, these companies are playing with people's lives. And employers and corporations are faceless entities that don't care about the people under them. And this even extends to the managers at a lot of these places, right? They get their 40 hours a week. They're never going to have to worry about barely getting used by their job. So they're always taken care of. But the rest of us, we got to sit here and pray and hope that next week our job decides to use us more than a number of a number that exceeds two per days a week. It's really awful stuff. And the other part of this is that when you get involved with these businesses, the only way to make them do something that's not in their best interest is to make there to be consequences for treating their employees this way. Um, A lot of jobs like the whole revolving door thing, right? If people just starting to work there and then after like 3, 4 weeks they leave, and then some new person comes, and after a few weeks or a month they leave, because again they don't have to worry about any benefits or just the things that would come into place if you use somebody more often or retain people for longer. So they almost have, in a way, been disincentivized from caring more about the people that have consistently worked for them for over a year, like I have. And there should be a consequence for that behavior. But yeah, this is I don't, I talked about like the rotten society. I think there is something wrong when a person can work a job, by all estimates, by all claims on their part, do what is asked of him or her, and all of a sudden not get used as much as they used to. Not because the place is suddenly, about to close doors and they're only operating once a week now instead of 6 times or 7 days a week. No, because they just don't feel like giving you more hours. That's all it comes down to. I had a conversation with the lovely Botox lipped manager, and she couldn't tell me why I was getting less hours, other than to say maybe it was my fault because I didn't know how to do every single damn thing in that place, even though I didn't have to before. So this is what I'm talking about, where there should be some accountability for playing with people's lives, because when you cut people's hours, you're cutting how much money they make per week, and all the bills and various utilities that person has to pay don't just suddenly vanish because you've decided that they're not going to make as much this week, in some arbitrary manner. God, I would have never, if this job had given me this many hours when I first started working there, I would have quit the second or first week of even being at that damn place. But again, they lure you in, right? It was decent when it started. Then there was a wage increase. Then a lot of the personnel that was there when I started is gone, and now it's all been replaced by these heartless, demonic freaks that I really think should be held accountable for doing something like this to an employee who did everything they wanted but was punished nonetheless.